In this video, we're going to be taking a look at subtraction with renaming, and the essential question that we are going to unlock is how can you use renaming to find the difference of two mixed numbers. Now you will need to turn your Go Math book to page 269, get out your pencil and also your math journal. So taking a look at that problem on page 269, okay, we can see the problem is to practice for a race. Kara is running 2.5 miles. When she reaches the end of her street, she knows that she has already run 1 5/6 miles. How many miles does Karen have left to run? So the first thing we need to figure out, and the first thing that I want you to do, is take a look at this problem, and we want to zero in on what we need to figure out. Okay, so let's underline the question. How many miles does Kara have left to run? That's our question, so let's underline that. Now what operation are we going to use? We are going to use subtraction. Okay, so let's write that in on page 269. Now from here we're going to subtract 2 1/2 minus 1 5/6. Okay, so what we're going to do first of all is we're going to estimate the answer. Whenever we estimate, that helps us out to make sure that our final answer is reasonable. In other words, it's close to the estimate. Okay, so 2.5, we're going to round that to the nearest benchmark fraction. We're just going to keep it right at 2.5 because that 1/2 is a benchmark fraction there. Okay, now moving to the 1 5/6. Now that 5/6 is very close to a whole number, so we're going to change that 1 5/6 to actually 2. Okay, then from here we have 2.5 minus 2, we know is going to give us 1/2. Okay, now that we've estimated, what we need to do is we need to find a common denominator. Okay, and what we can do, we need to figure that out. So what they're doing in this problem, they're just multiplying by opposite denominators. 2, the 1/2, they multiplied by 6. 5/6, they multiplied by 2 because that's the opposite denominator. Now whenever you're finding common denominators, you do not ever do anything with the whole number. You're just multiplying the fraction here. Okay, so we have now our common denominators. So what we do for the next step, okay, we see that we start subtracting our numerators. 10 minus 6, you cannot take 10 away from 6. Okay, in other words, if you have 6 M&Ms, you cannot take 10 away. Someone cannot take 10 away from you. So what you need to do is you need to rename 2/6 as a mixed number with a fraction greater than 1. Okay, so what we are going to do is we're going to regroup. All right, so that 2 is going to become a 1, and what we're doing is we're taking whatever the denominator is, we're adding 12/12 to 6/12. Okay, if that denominator was 13, we would add 13 to the numerator, for example. If it was 85, we would add 85 to that numerator. But remember, you're just adding 1, and no matter how you dice it up, a numerator and denominator that are equal always equals 1. Okay, so we are adding 12/12, taking that 1, adding 12/12 to the 6/12, which gives us 1, that whole number stays the same, 1 18/12. You can see I added 12 to that 6, giving me 18. The numerator stays the same, or the denominator stays the same for 1 18/12. Okay, now from here what we can do, we can subtract numerator 18 minus 10. Now we can do that, giving us 8/12. 1 minus 1 is 0. Okay, now we need to simplify 8/12. If we are reducing that, that is actually 2/3 in simplest form. Okay, so from here we find the difference in everything. We've simplified it so we can answer the question. Kara has 2/3 mile left to run. Okay, so whenever you're regrouping, you just want to take a look at that denominator, and what we did to that 6/12, we just added 12/12 to that, giving us 1 18/12. Now we have the explain question at the bottom, and it says explain why it is important to write equivalent fractions before renaming. And the answer for this, it is important to write equivalent fractions first to determine if renaming is needed. Okay, so I do want you to write that in your own words, or you can rewind your video and write exactly what I just said. So it is important to write equivalent fractions first to determine if renaming is needed. Okay, so I showed you how that you can, whenever you have you need to regroup or rename. You can rename the first mixed number. Now we're going to take a look at that other way on page 270. It says rename both mixed numbers as fractions greater than 1. Okay, so what we're doing is we're taking these mixed numbers and we're making them improper fractions. Okay, so first of all, we do need to find a common denominator. All right, and the common denominator of 1/2 and 5/6 is 6. Think about if I'm writing multiples of 2. I have 2, 4, 6, or I also know that 2 goes into 6 evenly. Now I need to figure out what do I do to that 2 in order to make it a 6. I multiply by 3, therefore I have to multiply my numerator by 3 as well. Okay, which will give me 2 and 3/6. That 1 and 5/6 stays the same. Okay, so what we need to do now, we need to make that 2 and 3/6 into an improper fraction. So what you do with 2 and 3/6 to make an improper fraction, this is important to know, you multiply the denominator by the whole number, and then you add the numerator. Okay, so 2 times 6 gives me 12, plus 3 is 15, and the denominator stays the same, 15/6. Okay, so you can see that 15 over 6. Now in order to make 1 and 5/6 into an improper fraction, you do the same thing. I'll use a different color of ink here. Multiply denominator by whole number and then add the numerator. 1 times 6 is 6, plus 5 is 11. And then that denominator stays the same for 11/6. Okay, so what we do now, we can start working this out. 15/6 minus 11/6. You can see here, 15 minus 11. Now that will work. Okay, gives us 4. The denominator stays the same, 4/6. Okay, we need to simplify 4/6 because I know that both that 2 can go evenly into 4 and 6. Divide both of those by 2, giving me 2/3. Okay, then our final step, we take that 2.5 minus 1 and 5/6. We can see now equals 2/3. Okay, so what I did here, I just changed both. I found an equivalent or a common denominator, and then I created both, or changed both of those mixed numbers into improper fractions, and then I subtracted. So this is just another way to subtract mixed numbers when you need to rename. Okay, we're going to do one more together, then I'll have you do the rest of these by yourself. So we take 1 and 3/4 is if we're going to estimate that 1 and 3/4 can be rounded to 2. That 7/8, I know that 7 over 8 is close to 1, so I'm going to rename that or round it to 1. 2 minus 1 gives me 1. Okay, now next thing we're going to do is we're going to do this with regrouping. Okay, so we have 3/4 and 7/8. Now I know that my 4 can go into 8, so what I want to do is find a common denominator first of all. So I have 1 and 6/8 minus 7/8. Okay, now once I have a common denominator, I can start subtracting. I'm going to use a different color of ink here. Now I know I cannot take 7 away from 6, so I need to rename. I'm going to borrow from the ones place, turning that into a 0. Now I need to borrow a whole number from that ones place. Now remember, whenever the numerator and denominator are equal, that represents a whole number. So I'm going to add 8/8 to my 6/8. Okay, why am I adding 8/8? Where am I getting that 8 from? That's the denominator that I already have. If the denominator was 57, I would have 57 over 57. But since it's 8, I'm adding 8/8 to 6/8, equaling 14/8 now. Okay, and now that 7/8 will stay the same. I did not need to regroup anything there. Now if I take 14 minus 7, that's going to give me 7. Denominator stays the same for a total of 7/8. I look at my final answer. That's close to my estimate, so I know it's reasonable. So my answer is 7/8. Okay, I'm going to do one more with you because I want to show you the other way just one more time. 12 and 1/9 minus 7 and 1/3. The first thing I need to do is find a common denominator, and I know that my 3 goes into 9 3 times. So I'm going to multiply both numerator and denominator by 3, giving me 7 and 3/9. Okay, and then I have 12 and 1/9. Now what I need to do with both of those, I need to change them into, we're going to change these into improper fractions. Okay, so changing these into improper fractions, I multiply the denominator by the whole number, then add the numerator. 12 times 9 is 108, plus 1 is 109. Let's write this down. 109 over 9. Okay, and then if I'm changing this to an improper fraction, 9 times 7, multiply that denominator by whole number, then add the numerator. 9 times 7, 63, plus 3 is 66. 66 over 9. Okay, now I have 109 minus 66 ninths. Okay, so 109 ninths minus 66 ninths. I take 109, subtract 66 from that, and that gives me 43. The denominator stays the same for 43 ninths. Now what I want to do is I want to change this back into a mixed number. In order to do that, I divide my numerator by my denominator. 9 into 43 goes 4 times. 4 times 9, 36. I have 7 for my remainder. Now my remainder is my numerator, and I always think about this as the R stands for right on top. Okay, my whole number is my quotient, so 4, 7 goes right on top of my fraction. Denominator stays the same for a total of 4 and 7/9. It is very important that you change that improper fraction back to a mixed number. Okay, I want you to work through these problems at your seat all by yourself. When you're finished, you can press play. You can use either of the strategies that I showed you. And when you press play, I will have these answers for you. So pause the video now. Okay, here are the answers for these 3 problems. You can see that I did both different I did the different strategies for the 3 of them here. 1 and 3/4, 1 and 11/12, 3 and 9/10. Make sure you check your work, check your steps, and compare them to mine. Okay, wrapping up this video, let's take a look at the test prep problem. I want you to work through this problem all by yourself. When you're finished, you can press play. I will have the answer for you. So pause the video now. Okay, the answer is letter C. And moving to the essential question, how can you use renaming to find the difference of 2 mixed numbers? You can see the possible answer here. It's really 2 different ways you can do it. It's very important that you pick a strategy and really understand that process very well. Now this concludes the video on subtraction with renaming. If you have any questions about this concept, please come and see me.